The guard's hand trembled as he unlocked the steel door. Inside Folsom Prison, 2,000 convicted criminals waited in complete silence. What nobody knew was that the man about to walk onto that stage was more broken than any of them. Johnny Cash hadn't slept in 3 days. His hands shook from withdrawal. His marriage was collapsing. Columbia Records had given him one final chance. This concert would either resurrect his dying career or end it forever. As he stood backstage at California's most notorious maximum security prison on January 13th, 1968, even he didn't believe he'd make it out alive. But something happened in those prison walls that morning. Something that would change music history forever. 6 months earlier, Johnny Cash was a ghost of the legend he once was. The man who dominated country music charts throughout the 1950s now couldn't get radio stations to play his songs. His voice, once powerful enough to shake concert halls, was ravaged by years of amphetamine abuse and alcohol. His weight had dropped to 155 pounds on his 6'2" frame. He looked like death walking. His first wife, Vivian, had finally left him, taking their 4 daughters. He'd been arrested 7 times in a single year, twice for drug possession, once for trying to smuggle amphetamines across the Mexican border, hidden in his guitar case. The judge had looked at him with something worse than anger. Pity. "Mr. Cash," the judge had said, "you're killing yourself, and we're all watching it happen." Columbia Records executive Don Law sat across from Johnny in a dim Nashville office that November. The conversation every artist dreads. "Johnny, the label's losing faith," Don said quietly. "Your last 3 albums barely sold 5,000 copies each. That's career-ending numbers." Johnny stared at his hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. "I've been fighting for you," Don continued, "but they want to drop you. I bought you one more chance. One last album. Make it count, or—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. That night, Johnny sat alone in his house outside Nashville. Pills scattered across the table, a loaded gun in the drawer. He'd hit bottom so many times he didn't think there was anywhere left to fall. Then the phone rang. "Johnny, I've got a crazy idea." It was Bob Johnston, his producer. "What if we recorded your next album in a prison?" The silence stretched for 10 seconds. "You still there, Johnny?" "Which prison?" Johnny's voice was barely a whisper. "Folsom, in California. It's rough. Maximum security. Murderers. Lifers. The worst of the worst." Johnny's mind flashed back to 1953, 15 years earlier. He'd seen the movie Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison in a theater in Germany while serving in the Air Force. Something about it had haunted him ever since. He'd even written a song about it, Folsom Prison Blues, which became his first major hit in 1956. "When you're inside those walls," Bob continued, "the inmates can't leave. Can't walk out if they don't like the show. It's a captive audience in the most literal sense. And Johnny, those men will understand you. They'll hear your music differently than anyone else in the world." But what Bob didn't say, what Johnny knew in his bones, was darker. This could be career suicide, performing for criminals, recording an album in a prison. No major country artist had ever done anything like it. The country music establishment would see it as desperate, pathetic. The final humiliation of a fading star. Yet something stirred in Johnny's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. "Set it up," Johnny said. June Carter paced across Johnny's living room. They'd been touring together for years, and something deeper had been growing between them, though neither had fully acknowledged it yet. She'd watched him nearly die a dozen times, pulled him back from overdoses, canceled shows when he was too wrecked to stand. "Johnny, this is insane," she said, her voice tight with fear. Folsom isn't some county jail. These are men who've murdered people, rapists, mobsters. You're going to walk in there weak as you are right now, and what? Sing them songs? June, you can barely stand up straight. You haven't eaten a real meal in weeks. What happens if there's a riot? What happens if someone decides they want to be famous for killing Johnny Cash? He looked at her, and for the first time in months, his eyes were clear. Then I'd die doing something that matters. The words hung in the air between them. Those men, Johnny continued slowly, they're where I've been. In my head, in my heart, I've been in prison for years. Pills, booze, regret. Maybe this is how I get out. June's eyes filled with tears. And what if you don't come back? Johnny didn't have an answer. January 13th, 1968, 9:15 a.m. The prison van rolled through 3 security checkpoints. Guard towers loomed overhead, rifles glinting in the morning sun. Johnny sat in silence, watching the razor wire pass by. Beside him, June clasped her hands so tightly her knuckles were white. The Tennessee Three, his backup band, looked like they were heading to their own execution. Marshall Grant, his bass player, leaned over. Johnny, you sure about this? Before Johnny could answer, the van stopped. The door opened. The sound hit them first. A low rumbling. 2,000 men packed into the prison cafeteria, stomping their feet in unison. The concrete floor shook. The walls seemed to vibrate. It was like standing next to a freight train. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. A guard with a scar across his face stepped up to Johnny. Mr. Cash, I need to be clear about something. We've got murderers in there, guys serving 20 to life, guys with nothing to lose. If something goes wrong, my men will get you out, but... He paused. It might not be fast enough. Johnny nodded. His hands had stopped shaking. For the first time in months, the fear was gone, replaced by something else. Purpose. The hallway to the cafeteria stretched for what felt like miles. Johnny's boots echoed on concrete. Every step brought him closer to the roar of 2,000 convicted felons who'd been locked in their cells for days, amped up for this single moment. June grabbed his hand. Johnny? He squeezed back. I love you, he said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. If something happens... Nothing's going to happen, she said fiercely, but her hand was trembling. The door to the cafeteria was solid steel, 6 inches thick. A guard's hand reached for the handle. This was it. No turning back. Career resurrection, or career suicide. Life or death. The door opened. The noise was deafening. 2,000 men screaming, stomping, banging metal cups against tables. The crowd was a sea of blue prison uniforms, hard faces, tattoos, scars. Men who'd killed. Men who'd lost everything. Men who had nothing left but this moment. Johnny stepped onto the makeshift stage, just a wooden platform elevated 3 feet off the ground. The guards had positioned themselves around the perimeter, hands on weapons. The warden stood in the back, looking like he regretted approving this insanity. Johnny picked up his guitar. The black acoustic felt heavy in his hands. He stepped up to the microphone. The roar intensified. Men were standing on tables now. The guards looked nervous. And then Johnny did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not a performer's smile. A real smile. The smile of a man who'd finally found his people. He leaned into the microphone and spoke the words that would become legendary. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. The place exploded. Men screamed themselves hoarse. The stomping was so intense, dust fell from the ceiling. For 30 seconds, pure chaos. Then Johnny raised his hand. Silence fell like a curtain. I want to start with a song I wrote after watching a movie about this place, Johnny said. His voice was steady now, strong. Some of you might know it. He struck the first chord. The opening riff of Folsom Prison blues rang out through the cafeteria. And when Johnny sang those famous words, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," the prisoners went absolutely insane. But something else was happening too. Johnny was transforming. With every song, Johnny felt stronger. The weakness, the shaking, the years of pills and self-destruction, it all seemed to burn away in the raw energy of that room. These men understood him in a way audiences in concert halls never could. They'd lived the darkness he sang about. They knew what it meant to be trapped, desperate, forgotten. When he sang "Dark as a Dungeon" about coal miners trapped underground, the prisoners heard their own story. When he performed 25 Minutes to Go, a darkly comic song about a man counting down to his own execution, the inmates laughed and cheered because humor was sometimes the only thing standing between them and despair. June watched from the side of the stage, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't the broken man she'd been trying to save for years. This was Johnny Cash reborn. Between songs, Johnny talked to the inmates like they were old friends. "I've been in jail a few times myself," he said, and the crowd roared with recognition. "Nothing like what you boys are going through, but I've seen my share of walls." A prisoner in the front row shouted, "We love you, Johnny." "I love you too," Johnny said. And he meant it. Halfway through the set, Johnny paused. "I want to do something special," he said. "This next song, I've never performed it in front of an audience before. I wrote it for every man who's ever felt forgotten, for every guy the world gave up on." He started playing a slow, haunting melody. The words poured out. "I hear the train a-comin'. It's rollin' round the bend." It was a new version of Folsom Prison blues, rawer and more powerful than anything he'd recorded before. His voice cracked on certain lines, not from weakness, but from emotion. He was singing about his own imprisonment, his own desperate hope for freedom. When the song ended, there was a moment of complete silence. 2,000 hard men, struck speechless. Then one prisoner started clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause that lasted 3 full minutes. Men were crying, openly weeping. Some were pounding on the tables so hard their hands bled. The guards looked stunned. The warden's mouth hung open. June Carter was sobbing. And Johnny Cash, the broken, desperate, dying Johnny Cash, stood taller than he had in years. But just as the concert reached its emotional peak, something went wrong. During Greystone Chapel, a song written by prisoner Glenn Shirley, a fight broke out in the back of the cafeteria. A violent confrontation between rival gang members. Shouting, the sound of bodies hitting concrete. Guards rushed toward the disturbance. Inmates surged to their feet. The entire room was seconds away from chaos. Johnny saw it happening. Saw his moment, this impossible, beautiful moment about to dissolve into violence. He didn't hesitate. He struck a massive chord on his guitar. The amplified sound crashed through the room like thunder. Every head turned. "Hey!" Johnny's voice boomed through the microphone. "We're not done here!" The room froze. Johnny launched into the opening of "I Walk the Line," one of his biggest hits. Fast, driving, impossible to ignore. The fighters stopped. The guards paused, and slowly, incredibly, the inmates sat back down. Johnny had just stopped a prison riot with nothing but his guitar and his voice. The guards looked at each other in disbelief. Even the warden looked shaken. Johnny kept playing, his eyes scanning the crowd. "We're all in this together," he said between verses. "Every single one of us. We're all trying to find our way out of our own prisons." The room was absolutely silent, except for Johnny's voice. As the concert moved toward its finale, Johnny called June Carter onto the stage. She was terrified. This wasn't part of the plan. But Johnny held out his hand, and she took it. They performed Jackson together, their voices intertwining in that magical way they always did. The chemistry between them was electric. The prisoners could feel it. The love that had been building for years, unspoken, was suddenly visible to everyone in that room. When the song ended, Johnny pulled June close. Right there, in front of 2,000 convicted felons, he whispered something in her ear. "Marry me." June's eyes went wide. "What?" "I mean it. I'm done running. I'm done destroying myself. Marry me, June. Save me." The microphone had picked up every word. The entire prison heard it. The place went absolutely wild. Men were screaming, "Marry him, June!" The stomping started again, shaking the walls. June looked at Johnny, really looked at him. And she saw it. The man she'd fallen in love with years ago, finally fighting his way back to the surface. "Ask me again, when we're not surrounded by murderers," she said, laughing through tears. The prisoners loved it. They loved her. They loved this moment of raw, real humanity happening right in front of them. For the finale, Johnny chose a song that would become his signature, San Quentin, written specifically about another notorious prison. But tonight, it was for every man in that room. The lyrics were angry, rebellious, a direct attack on the prison system itself. "San Quentin, I hate every inch of you." The warden tensed. The guards shifted nervously. This was dangerous territory. But Johnny didn't care. He sang with more passion than he'd shown in years. Because he understood now. He'd been San Quentin. He'd been his own warden, his own guard, his own prisoner. And tonight, in the most unexpected place in the world, he'd found the key to his cell. When the last note faded, Johnny stood at the microphone, breathing hard. Sweat poured down his face. His voice was nearly gone. But his eyes were clear. "Thank you," he said simply. "You men, you gave me something today. You gave me back my life." The applause was deafening. It went on for 10 minutes. Men who'd committed terrible crimes, men who'd lost everything, standing and cheering for a broken country singer who dared to see them as human. As Johnny and the band prepared to leave, something unprecedented happened. The prisoners formed 2 lines, creating a path from the stage to the exit. As Johnny walked between them, men reached out to touch his hand, his shoulder. Not threatening, reverent. "Thank you for seeing us," one man whispered. "You gave us hope," said another. "Come back," a third said, tears in his eyes. "Please come back." Johnny shook as many hands as he could. June walked beside him, still processing his marriage proposal. The Tennessee Three followed, stunned by what they'd just witnessed. When they reached the final security door, Johnny turned back, looked at the sea of blue uniforms, the hard faces, the men society had thrown away. "I'll be back," he promised. "I swear it." And he was. Johnny Cash would perform at prisons for the rest of his career, never forgetting the men who'd saved him when he needed saving most. At Folsom Prison was released in May 1968. Columbia Records was nervous. They'd pressed a minimal first run, expecting it to fail. It sold 500,000 copies in the first month. By the end of the year, it had gone triple platinum. It spent 4 weeks at #1 on the country charts and crossed over to the pop charts, reaching number 13. Songs from the album dominated radio. Johnny Cash, the has-been, the junkie, the failure, was suddenly the biggest star in country music. But more than that, the album changed the conversation about prisons, about inmates, about second chances. Reform movements cited Johnny's concert as proof that prisoners were human beings capable of redemption. Guards who'd worked at Folsom for decades said the atmosphere in the prison changed after that concert. Men who'd given up on life found hope. And Johnny? He married June Carter on March 1st, 1968, less than 2 months after Folsom. He got clean, stayed clean for years, rebuilt his relationship with his daughters, became a father again with June, created some of the most important music of the next 3 decades. Decades later, after Johnny Cash had passed, June Carter was asked about that day at Folsom Prison, about the marriage proposal in front of 2,000 criminals, about the moment everything changed. She smiled through tears. Johnny always said Folsom saved his life, but really, those men saved each other. Johnny saw himself in them, and they saw hope in him. That's what redemption looks like. Not perfect, not clean, but real. The guard who'd escorted Johnny that day, the one with the scar, later said this: "In 30 years working at Folsom, I saw a lot of violence, a lot of hopelessness. But that day? That was the only time I ever saw joy inside those walls. Real, pure joy. Cash gave those men something nobody else ever had. Dignity." Glenn Shirley, the prisoner who wrote Greystone Chapel, was eventually paroled. Johnny gave him a job on his tour crew. Shirley struggled with life on the outside and eventually took his own life in 1978. But for a few years, he got to live his dream because Johnny Cash believed in him. The Folsom concert recording, with all its raw imperfections, the background noise of inmates shouting, the tension in Johnny's voice, became one of the most important live albums in music history. It's been cited as an influence by everyone from Bruce Springsteen to U2. But the real legacy is simpler. On January 13th, 1968, a broken man walked into a maximum security prison expecting to die. Instead, he found salvation. And in doing so, he showed the world that nobody, absolutely nobody, is beyond redemption. The man in black had found his purpose, and he spent the rest of his life fighting for the forgotten, the imprisoned, the lost, because he knew what it meant to be all three. And it all started with one terrifying, beautiful morning inside Folsom Prison, when Johnny Cash looked into the eyes of society's outcasts and saw himself staring back.